and we're just trying to alert your mind on what we need to also put our minds on as far as getting ourselves ready for that very election taking place on December 7, 2016. But of course, we're your election headquarters. As always, you can get interactive on our various platforms we have. On Facebook, we have Join Us on TV. We've linked that very page to our Twitter handle at Join Us on TV. And you can also reach us through our WhatsApp platform 0560 800,000. And I have this very, almost like one of those multiple viral messages on social platforms. And this one is on WhatsApp. It's been sent by somebody who has not sent his name, almost like an education thereabout. It says, on election day, when the EC officials give you the ballot paper, please turn it over to see if they have been stamped or not. Otherwise, they will count your vote as rejected ballots. Make sure that your ballot paper has been stamped by the EC official as well. And it says, please share on all platforms. But what we're sharing with you next is the current phenomenon in which we have not only exercise books, but other reading literature that has been either printed or imported into this country, being spread or sold to many schools across the country, or even in the various retail outlets. And at the beginning of the school year, you get to find a lot of them. For example, we have this. This one has an icon, the DIU on it, so that's okay. We also have the Black Stars pictures. But we also have a picture of one of those young artists in Hollywood. And this one has a picture of Miley Cyrus. We all know this one is one of the pictures taken from Hannah Montana. And now you get to see that they do a certain transition when they grow up. Hannah Montana is, my kids watch her as well, but now you see Hannah Montana years after. Hannah Montana is looking different. She's not Miley Cyrus with a lot of tattoos and all that and that culture infiltration. So does that teach very good things to our kids? Do we put the big six on those literature or in those literature, or even let's say Kukwananse or the president's picture or somebody who does great for our country or our continent, or we decide to put let's say Godzilla or Ben 10 or something else? Anis Haffer has a great experience in education in the United States of America, has great experience on education in Ghana and the rest of the continent. He's here with me. Thanks for joining me. He also writes a column in the Daily Graphic. And what I've described for you, you seem to have put your mind to that current phenomenon. Where do we trace that very generation? What is it supposed to do, achieve at all, having imagery on reading literature?
Yeah, I think you use the word, the images. The images are very important. The images have a lasting effect on the minds of young, impressionable people, the children. So it's very important in terms of the images that we want to begin to show. Now, for example, I mean, when I was in school, when you have an exercise book, on the back of it, you have like the metric system, you have multiplication tables, you have things that you can use. On the cover might be the name of the school, for example. Now, things have changed a bit where we want to put a spotlight on particular personalities, people that we can emulate. And I think you made mention of some of them. Like, for example, it would be good to know, let's say, people who made historic significance in this country. You're looking at J. Kwejilagri, Kingsley Hayford. You know, you're looking at Francis L. Bartels, even Governor Gorgesbeck, people who have made impact. We can also begin to look at images of people who have been important in the sciences. You know, those who are doing heart surgery. Those are the images that we want to look at. We want to look at the great mathematicians. We want to look at some of the great farming methods and those sort of things. What these things do is that it brings the minds of young people to the things that matter. Now, if we skip that and we are bringing imported pictures, images, it can be distorted. I mean, for example, when you begin to look at, we don't want to just begin to focus on Hollywood and so on, because these are fleeting moments. You know, we want to have people of character. We want people that we can emulate in positive ways. So these are the discussions that have to go on. We can't take those things for granted. You know, if we were to ask a child, for example, who was the first president of Ghana, they might tell you one of the images that they see on the cover of the exercise books. So these are things that we want to begin to pay attention to. But for me, the other thing that's very important is that we need to have a vision of this country. Where are we going in the future? What are the kinds of things that we need to do? And the most important things, we have to focus on that. It's what's Ghana's natural endowment. Where can we add value? And what is it that we can do? So if you look at, let's say, some of our natural resources, this is very important. Where are our natural resources and how can we add value to those things? And even if you go in the savannah regions, I couldn't believe it. I was reading some literature on it and the different kinds of nuts that are produced in the various districts. This is a whole industry that can probably beat cocoa, you know, because when you go into the shopping centers of some of the international areas that one has seen, you realize that these nuts are being packaged. And these are consumer items that people eat all the time, but we don't produce them. You know, we want to show that. We also want to begin to look at, another example that I will give is this. Let's look at the electric meters. Every house has an electric meter. So the chances are we need over 1 million electric meters. But then what do? We import all that from China. See, these are the things that we want to begin to show our young people that there are possibilities. Electric meter is nothing but a case, a plastic case with wires in it. Why don't we produce these things? My point is this. We want to alert young people to Ghana's possibilities. We want to alert young people to the possibilities that we need to move out of the third world into the first world, depending on ourselves, not in images that are of absolutely no use to us. So these are the things that we really have to pay attention to.
Now, for early childhood education and those who impact teaching and learning at that very level, what does imagery do for children?
You know, I'll give you a classic example. Children like things that are fun. You know, they want to look at, in fact, they like animals that are even wearing clothes, you know, the kind of Sesame Street type activities and so on. But we also have to be creative. Begin to understand what it is that motivates young people, the kind of imagery. And so, frankly, we need to now begin to create the right kind of images, even if they are puppets and that sort of thing, that are made in Ghana. You know, this business of over-dependence on what other people do, it's important to begin to look at what others do and the effect on children who are growing up. But we have to begin to adapt those things to our culture. Otherwise, what happens is that, I mean, look at the wigs that people are wearing now. Every person is wearing these flowing wigs. Some are blonde, brunette, and the rest of it. You know, that's one way to look at it. But is that the image that we want to impose on a child in a kindergarten, lower primary? These are serious questions because we are being framed to look in a way that are not natural to us. Those are the very difficulties, and that can be very confusing for children. So we have to begin to look inwardly and look at the superior sides of our culture. There's a lot about this culture that others come to learn and emulate. But for us, we take those things for granted and we tend to think that everybody else is better than who we are. That is very important. That's why we also have to go to visit Nkrumah when he began to talk about the African personality. You know, we have to begin to look at these things. That how long are we going to live in the images of other cultures?
Yeah.
What about us? You know,
right.
So these are questions that we have to address.
For example, the last 2 days, my younger son kept telling me about Benjamin Franklin, the things Benjamin Franklin did, and the things he invented and how he lived his life. So I asked him, "Do you know about Dr. Kwame Nkrumah?" He said, "Yeah, I learned it in a textbook." What does he do? He didn't really know a lot about Benjamin Franklin. I didn't teach my young child about Benjamin Franklin, but he knows a lot more about Benjamin Franklin than he does Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. I asked him, "Where did you?" He said, "I saw it in a book, and the books are available for them to read." How do we make some of these things closer? Because the book that he showed me, the imagery has been done in such a way that even though you have a picture of Benjamin Franklin, it's been cartooned in a certain way. So it's attractive for them to read. The words are big enough, so it's attractive for each page has a picture, etc. How can we do that?
Now, to look at the image of Benjamin Franklin is very important because there's someone who's accomplished things for his own country. And there's nothing wrong with looking at the accomplishments of people who have made great strides for other countries. But then what we have to do is to begin to look at the same phenomena and bring it back home and begin to ask ourselves, who are our local people who have done great things? Look at Ifrimamu. Ifrimamu was one person who believed in using our local materials, our local resources for the things that we want to do. So, excuse me, we can also begin to look at cartoon characters in those images because they are closer to us than someone who's 3,000-4,000 miles away. We want to begin to look at that. We can look at Dr. Frimpong Boateng, who's a heart surgeon.
Or Professor Nketia.
Or Professor Nketia, you know, who is one of the greatest ethnomusicologists in the world. You know, we bypass all these great people. And the issue was this, again, check this. But the danger, there's also a danger though. Young people look to particular images, and frankly, the kind of images that you see on television all the time are the politicians. When I came, that's what you guys were doing. You know, so it behooves the people in leadership positions themselves to be exemplary. You know, when you go into an international arena and there are conferences, the problems in Africa and so on, the first thing that they talk to you about is corruption. You know, so we are tainting particular images because they are associated with things that we don't want to see. So what I'm saying is this, we need to look at ourselves in important leadership positions and begin to understand that the things we do are important and the things that we don't do, that we need to do, are important, so that consistently it begins to reflect on the superior qualities of the African. So these are the things that we want to begin to understand, that this is our country. This is who we are. This is what we've been endowed with naturally by God. So how do we begin to add value to it? But at the end of the day, it's exactly how we raise young people. So these images are very important. What kind of images are we portraying to young people in terms of what is excellent and what is not? Those are the critical
Uncle
questions.
Haffer, do you know Ben 10?
I'm not sure I do.
Okay. But Ben 10 is a cartoon character, very ferocious, fierce fighting cartoon character. He's one of the heroes in that very cartoon series, and we have them on the bags that are sold in the supermarkets. We have, for example, Hannah Montana, who's now grown to become Miley Cyrus. That's her original name, etc. All on the bags and on the socks and everything. If you send your children to the supermarket or wherever they have to go and buy any kind of children-related item or reading literature, you put that image and the image of somebody else who is of a local descent or locally, they will choose that very character because they watch the cartoons, etc. You know, what makes the children behave the way they do?
Because these are marketing strategies that they've used over the past. So that's what they know, and it's attractive to them. Now, let me tell you this. The people who put these cartoon characters are very professional people. They are not little children. They are very professional people who know and understand the psychology of children. They know that if you give a kid A and B images, they are supposed to select one and not the other. So there's a lot of psychology that's been developed along those lines. But then this is what we need to do too, so that we begin to make our images attractive. Now, look at, you know, when I was walking here, when I was driving here, we went through the backstages and I saw primary schools. These schools sit in dust. The dust is blowing everywhere. The children are dusty and so on. I mean, what kind of image is that for us to begin to portray what excellence is? So the thing is this, we really have to get our act together. This is the 21st century. And even the element of cleanliness is important. So what we have to do now is begin to look at the images that are Afrocentric, the images that are peculiar to us. We want to look at how others have used their images to make them so powerful that it's a preference for young people, and begin to look at how we're going to develop our own images because we have them. You know, in the beginning, when the white people came here the first time and they saw a black woman in cornrow, as far as they were concerned, that was primitive. But now, the superstars, even including the boys, do their hair in cornrows. Stevie Wonder and the rest of it. All these are African imports. You know, so what I'm saying is this: under no circumstances should we begin to belittle what it's natural to us, but we have to add value to these things. We have to make them attractive. And the key thing is that we have to begin to understand that this is who we are.
Okay.
We are not Singaporeans, we are not Chinese, we are not white Americans, we are not blonde, we are not brunettes. This is who we are, and come to grips with reality in terms of what we are.
And we have on the line somebody who is into advertising and publishing, Gideon Ametoji. A very good morning to you, sir. Now, particularly when we know that the Southeast Asians, they tend to make sure that their icons, those who have made history in their countries, whether it's Pakistan, Bangladesh, or Sri Lanka or India, they tend to have them as far as the imagery would be on their reading literature, and also for the various cartoons and other sort of works for children that are displayed on their market on television. How do we also, how will we be able to replicate that in our market as well?
Oh, I think it's quite simple. Basically, advertising.
Oh, we seem to have lost him. We'll try and get Gideon back on the line. But then how do we counter that with policy?
Well, first of all, you know, we study psychology in this country. We study animation in this country. To be honest with you, I know some very good people who do animation in some of the schools here.
You mean locally?
Locally, yes. Oh, excellent stuff. Where they do these comic images, cartoon images, and so on. But we have to begin to reorient them to who we are. So these people now have to come on board, and it will be very interesting to look at the point of view of the publisher. And also we have part of our own culture where we can create humor. We can create what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and these have to be mainstreamed into the education culture. But also the important thing is this: you see, we have potential that we never exert. You know, we tend to kick back, look at what others are doing, and then we buy them in bulk, and then we distribute these things in our system. But we have to be circumspect now, in terms of now knowing that we need, like I said earlier, we need an African personality. These are young, impressionable people. What is that we can do to elicit their interest, for them to develop their confidence? But then the other thing is this: it's also very important now to engage children themselves in the process, you know, because what we do is that we sit down all day long, copying things on paper and produce them for exams and so on. Some element of creativity has to come in.
Now, Gideon, you're back on the line. How do we do that? Make sure that instead of putting Miley Cyrus, who used to be Hannah Montana, and Miley Cyrus, I don't know whether her lifestyle and her image will be right for our children, or having Ben 10, etc. We have Kukwanansi, and instead of Miley Cyrus, perhaps we have somebody who is a lot more appealing locally to our children.
All right, like I was saying, this is very simple. You know, we look into our country today, and we have a lot of very respectable persons, you know, who have achieved a lot of things in our country. And most of these children look up to them, and they yearn to be like them someday. So as advertisers, you know, you can as well use their images on books and newspapers and all of that, you know, to attract these children. For instance, let me use an example, Abedi Pele. Abedi Pele is someone who has in the area of football, and there are a lot of young guys who want to be like Abedi Pele in one, someday to come. So such a person, we can use his personality on our books, and it will go a long way to motivate most of these kids. You understand? So it's very simple, but sometimes I tend to describe it as cheap advertising, because most advertisers find it very easy to copy most of these images from the internet. They tend to use them rather than going for, you know, people, our very own people. So that is how I see it.
But particularly, what will make people perhaps go and import books or print books in Ghana and not have the images of local people, but would rather put Hollywood stars and personalities that represent different things for different people in different cultures?
All right. For me, like I said, I call it cheap advertising. You know, it's very easy for you to download most of these styles outside the country, you know, and use them in our printing process. For instance, you want to officially use someone notably in our country, first of all, you need to approach that person and possibly arrange for a photo shoot. And sometimes you need to also pay something, okay? And most of these advertisers want to run away from all these processes and then make things cheaper for them by just, copy and pasting. So for me, that's how I see it. That's how I see it.
Well, thank you very much, Gideon Ametoji, and thanks for your comments on that. He's an advertiser and also a publisher, giving us his own perspective as to how we can do that. But we have the PRO for the Ghana Education Service, and Reverend Jonathan Betty is on the line. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, my brother. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm doing well. I hope you are doing well too.
Yes, but your line is very faint.
Okay, but you can hear me somewhat.
Yeah.
Okay. Why is it that the Ghana Education Service, you go around the market, you tend to see a lot more of the exercise books and other reading literature that contain or have imagery of foreign personalities, Hollywood stars whose cultures and cultural traits tend to represent different people for our children. But these things are very much pervasive or abundant on the market. And you don't seem to do anything about it. I'm not talking about you personally, but the Ghana Education Service or the Ministry of Education.
Well, thank you very much. Ghana Education Service, for that matter, the ministry, shouldn't be blamed for those exercise books which are in the market. The question is, are the exercise books from the government who supply the exercise books? Government knows what is good for the children of Ghana. And in the market, Ghana, in our markets, you realize that a lot of people are bringing in goods. A lot of people are bringing in whatever that will get them money into Ghana system. And another question is it our duty as the Minister of Education or Ghana Education Service to be going round or the whole market, Accra market, Assewa market, Atebubu, all the big markets, looking for the type of exercise that will be good for our children? Well, that should be answered by any individual. But what I want to say is that our days, when I was a people, the type of exercise books that we used wasn't like the current ones that are coming into the system from individuals. We were given exercise book, the cover page, the back cover page, timetable, 212, 224, 236, and very educative things were there. Now, when you look at the first page of the exercise book that we use, you see the coat of arms, very beautiful things on it, and it attracted us to learn. It's very unfortunate that these days individuals are coming in looking for money and they are bringing this.
Okay, Reverend Betty, I find it very ironic and very paradoxical that you, with the Ghana Education Service, the institution in which you belong, that's also supposed to be committed and championing policy and a certain guideline and ethics, you seem to be just leaving the situation in which the schools that you supervise and the pupils that attend those schools are being influenced by materials that are not sanctioned by you, and you seem to think it's a normal process.
Thank you very much. I would say that is not in order. What happened is that previously we ordered our headmasters never to allow such exercise books to be in our schools. They should not encourage the students to go into the market to buy those exercise books to their school premises. If an individual wants to buy exercise books for anything, fine. But when it's coming into our schools, we actually did not encourage those things. So as you draw in our attention to the continuity of these things, I think we will have a second look at it. We will speak to our heads, and we will see how best the students will also be educated against all these things. There are a lot of them too, I know, immoral, profane things are on it, and it's not so good for our system. Now, with the Ministry of Education to formulate a policy against that, I think they will also have a look at it, will draw the attention of the ministry. The ministry formulate the policies, and then we implement the policy. So we are working in collaboration with one another, and we'll see how best this can be addressed as soon as possible.
Very interesting. Very rather self-indicting, if you ask me.
Say it again.
It's your comments are self-indicting, indicating that perhaps the Ghana Education Service and the Ministry of Education not doing enough or not doing their work well.
That is never my statement. I am saying that those exercise books that government knows, or for that matter, Ministry of Education knows that will help the children, we have supplied. And Ghana Education Service, I don't think it is our prerogative or our assignment to be going around the market.
Now, what's your prerogative?
Can we remove?
You mean that the literature that is consumed by the pupils in our republic should not be your responsibility? The content of the images on those literature should not be your responsibility.
I think you're talking about the images. When it is images, we are finding means of addressing these issues as early as possible. As the public is also listening to us, I know they are taking clue. They are deciding what to do and what not to do about this issue. And what I have added is saying is that, when you talk about the literature aspect of it, we are working towards it. We have people who are qualified and people that we have assigned to to put into the market the good books that will be full of moral, full of lessons that our children will emulate. We have them in our market. So it is now for the individual. Now, why do you go in for that? Are you going in for that to entertain yourself, or you are learning something from it? I don't think it's the learning aspect, but the entertaining aspect of the pictures on the exercise. So we work towards that. We work.
Well, thank you very much. Reverend Jonathan Bete is a PR for the Ghana Education Service, but it's about enforcement and if there's any regulation at all to that.
We have to be realistic.
What's the best practice around the world?
Well, it will be okay. Now, when I was teaching the U.S., for example, you will not find images that were not American, because the American culture itself was quite innovative and it was sufficient for the consumption of the young population. Now, for us, we like to emulate things, but then I want to say a word for the Ghana Education Service or Ministry of Education. These are market forces.
Yes.
That are much greater than they can ever have on their purview. So we have to be realistic there. However, when we begin to look at subjects like social sciences, we want to begin to look at the influence, the negative influences on the culture. All of that has to be part of the package in terms of the curriculum that we develop, so that we see the young people themselves in the forefront of first trying to understand exactly what is going on. That's what education is about. We live in a global community. What are the influences that are positive? What are the influences that are negative? And we need to now raise a crop of teachers who themselves understand the phenomena and then let the children themselves participate. I will tell you this. Children are the greatest ambassadors that we have in terms of reaching their own peers. And their participation is crucial. But we need to be able to raise them with a kind of consciousness where they begin to understand what's not acceptable and what's acceptable. At least when they know what's not acceptable and they are pursuing it, then you know that there's a choice that they've made. But they need to be aware that part of an interaction as a course in social studies, it begin to understand this phenomenon. It has to be introduced.
Okay. Well, we have this one from Dapela Jihad, who says, good morning. Your discussion this morning is very important and interesting. I want to urge parents and guardians who go to buy books for their kids to always look at the images on them and make sure they buy those with images that will have positive influences and impact their kids positively. Great comments coming from, we have a lot more also coming from others. It says, Walker, in my opinion, all schools should print their textbooks, and you give us an image. And Uncle Anis Haffer brought in front of him his school, Faith Montessori School, and I think the one advertising a product, we can do that. He brought us even Alpha Beta Education Centers, etc.
And this is a book
an
that
old
I
one.
used 1961.
You used this one, 1961.
Yeah, 1961, and I was able to trace it. I was about 14.
You were about 14?
Yeah, Adam Franson, you were not born then. This is how it looked like.
Sure, I was not born.
This is how it looked like. It wasn't attractive, but when you look at the content, and I was surprised. I look at content in sense of geography.
And that was your handwriting at 14?
I couldn't believe it. I mean, those were the days.
Cursive. You're writing cursive. Yeah.
I mean, they took all those things seriously. you study Australia, you study Brazil,
Yeah.
North America, Africa, you know, the natural vegetation, that sort of thing.
Agriculture,
This is the age of 13 or 14. And this is one of my most treasured, and this is more important to me than these girly.
Yeah, Hannah Montana. All right, so that's where we have to call it a morning on our discussion. Next, thanks for joining me, Uncle Anis Haffer, an educationist. Thought that we needed to make sure that we impacted positively the values in our children, so he decided to help us or aid us in the discussions. But he has consulted in Ghana, the rest of the continent of Africa, elsewhere, taught in the United States of America after living there for decades, and is right here back in Ghana doing a lot of work and just traveling up and down. Thanks very much, Anis Haffer.
Thank you.
He has a column in the Daily Graphic. Please check out. When do you get our publications?
It comes out on Monday, Education Matters, and we address some of these issues.
Yes, I get copies, clippings all the time. I'm one of his...
You're one of my favorite stars.
Yes, okay, thank you, if I'm a star at all. John Kuma is a legal practitioner. He's a member of the MPP more so, but we're not only talking MPP, etc. We're talking legal matters. We know that the Electoral Commission, has now been told by the Supreme Court what needs to be done forthright as far as initially those who would have described as would-be disqualified presidential candidates, but now they've not been disqualified at all. The Supreme Court succinctly says that please give them a chance for them to correct their errors on their nomination forms, and then you take them back later and try to see whether they're okay, etc. So John Kuma will be joining me as we look at other discussions on AM Talk. It's up next. Do stay on.